We have been shelled several times, but nothing of great intensity, and we have been on the line for several weeks and still not fired our crew weapon. We had no casualties in the company, only a few cases of trench foot. Varilla from our squad was sent back to the rear of the revaluation.
John, what's trench foot?
Huh?
What does trench foot mean?
Trench foot?
Yeah.
Frozen foot. I got trench foot. Your feet get frozen. It aches all the time.
Okay.
There's no remedy for it.
No.
Varilla from our squad was sent back to the rear for revaluation. I was glad for him. He was out of it. He only reminded me to see how he would react in the years to come, knowing that he could not take it and backed off. As for myself, I was sort of getting used to the routine. What we had, I felt comfortable in my mind that I adjusted to combat conditions rather rapidly and smoothly. Granted, we were not involved in any great actions. Nevertheless, it was a big adjustment. And I had crossed the first gigantic hurdle. I felt more at ease, but there was always that lingering empty feeling in the pit of my stomach when there was something of substance coming up. I never really ever conquered it or fully suppressed it. We were still doing much jumping about, moving from one sector to another, not really knowing what was going on and wondering if we were really doing any good. We felt we were being deployed to plug in a hole one after another. The Germans would break through in one sector, and part of the division would rush over to assist in blocking their advance. In actuality, we never came face to face with the enemy. We only came in contact with them from a distance. Over the next hill, behind the tree line, across some river, and behind the next town. We were sleeping outside most of the time in almost zero weather with very few hot meals. I had not taken a shower since leaving Haverford West. Our morale was at its lowest point since leaving the States. And to make matters even worse, we're not operating as a division, but we're doled out in piecemeal the 7th Corps and 14th Corps to a division here where at times the most humiliating aspects held in the division reserve. In substance, we wanted to prove ourselves, but I guess the higher echelon outside of our division had other thoughts on the subject. In a way, breaking up the division to segments and attaching them to a more experienced unit was a godsend in disguise and probably saved many lives. At the time, we thought we were something amiss about our status in the field, and that was why we were shunted from one division to another. We were mostly in defensive positions, which entailed much digging in frozen ground, cold sleepless nights, and long covered bunkers, which is only some straw or twigs that kept us off the cold ground. We also sensed that something big was taking place, but our experience limited our scope of perception and just how gigantic in scale and magnitude this new German offensive was. So at that time, you had no idea how big the German offensive was going to be.
No.
It was going to be a monster offensive.
Oh yeah, that was the last big offense.
So none of the foot soldiers knew. Did the top brass know how big the Germans were becoming?
No, they had an inkling, but nothing was in detail.
Not as big as they turned out to be. By morning on 18 December, there were many more than 50 German columns probing the Andres to Manchow. Some had gone only a mile. Half had pierced as far as 10 to 12 miles, and one reached 30 miles. It was here in Shine Eifel sector that the Germans had surrounded the 106th Division in their march to St. Vith. We got a first glimpse of German tanks camouflaged white, followed by packs of white sheeted infantrymen. So what would you see? a big German tank, all painted white?
Tiger tank, yeah.
And then how many German soldiers were behind it?
Probably half a division.
And how many would that be?
Huh?
About how many people would that be?
No, they were shagging us and we were retreating faster.
No, about how many soldiers would be tagging the tanks?
Well, the ones that they couldn't keep up, they sat down and got worried off, and they sat down, that's when they got killed.
And all the German soldiers were dressed in white?
Yeah. They took sheets from the beds.
They took sheets from the beds?
Took the sheets from the beds and
Wow.
used it as camouflage.
We got our first glimpse of the German tanks camouflaged white, followed by a pack of white sheeted infantrymen. We were still in ODs, which could be seen for miles in snow-covered terrain. So you're wearing clothes in the snow, anyone can spot you for a
They're
mile.
like sitting
Yeah.
pigeons.
Yours like sitting ducks.
Yeah.
Most of our trucks were still traditional olive drab, and the only thing our infantry did to make themselves more inconspicuous in the snow was to find white bed sheets in the nearby farmhouses and use them for camouflage over their ODs. Our squad resorted onto the same procedure. We would cut a hole in the center of the sheet and then slip it over our heads as a cape. We would then tie it around our waist and some rope or string. There were rumors circulating that 6 companies had run out of bazooka shells and were down to filling wine bottles with gasoline and stuffing in the cloth wicks.
Wow.
As a German tank would come near the outpost, they would light their Molotov cocktail and throw it at the tank. So what happens now, the Americans ran out of bazooka shells,
Yeah.
and they would get some wine bottles, put some gasoline in it, and an old sheet or cloth.
Yeah.
When the tanks came, the American soldiers would throw it at the tanks. Was it effective?
If they had bazookas and stuff like that, they could knock the tank out.
But what about the Molotov cocktails? Were those effective?
Well, where the vents were in the tank, they found the vents, and the tank just dropped the cocktail into the vents.
So that was very effective.
Yeah, they in close to get a real bad shock.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. That's amazing. There were also rumors that, not from our company, going from house to house, routing terrified GIs out of cellars and putting them in doorways, threatening to shoot them if they left their post. There were rumors circulating that 6 companies had run out of bazookas. There were also rumors of officers, not from our company, going into a farmhouse and routing terrified GIs out of cellars and putting them in doorways, threatening to shoot them if they left their post. So a lot of American soldiers would hide in the basement,
Yeah,
and then the commanding officer would go in there and pull them out.
yeah.
Wow. As the Germans continued, they drove toward Antwerp and the port it afforded them. The Allied command was rushing reinforcements to contain them. The 82nd Airborne Division was racing from France, and the 9th and 30th Division were coming from the north. We were in the immediate area, but seemed that we were always reliving some outfit or standing outpost at some remote sector where there was not too much action going on. The definite pattern as to the strategy of the German offensive was beginning to form, but no one on the Allied side could see it. With telephone lines knocked out, radios jammed, and a battle was being fought on the squad, platoon, and company levels. The whole process of communication had been short-circuited. No communication then.
Yeah. They're left out.
No communication at all? No communications at all?
No. Well, they sent a runner back if he didn't get killed.
Oh, what was that?
He was sent a runner back if he didn't get killed.
By noon 18 December, the Battle of St. Vith was in full swing, and G Company had caught some action, and there were severe casualties. We were plodding through the snow and wondering why we were always moving and not staying in one spot long enough to tangle with the enemy. We found out later that we were employing a tactic called fire and maneuver.
What's fire and maneuver, John?
Firing, and maneuvering. We had trees, we had bushes in the water and everything else.
So if you stop with your heavy machine gun for too long and spent about 1,000 rounds, you would be a target. So you had to get up and move to another.
Oh,
place.
yeah.
Because they would get you
Yeah,
zeroed
because
in.
they zero in on you.
So you're always on the go.
Yeah. Fire 2 rounds, 2 or 3 belts, and that's leave
So you
off.
must have been in really good shape then.
Huh?
You must have been really in good shape then to move like that.
Well, it's either that or get killed.
Which we found out later we're employing a tactic called fire and maneuver, which meant that if we met in opposition, we're to assess and evaluate the situation, take it slow and easy, and not jump right into attack. Shock action was that the commanders wanted to avoid, due to the shortage of troops and supplies needed to contain a superior German force of tanks and infantry. The Allies needed time to build up their supply network and build up troops. We were that cushion to absorb the initial onslaught, contain where we're able to move away if it overpowered us. The prime concern at this early stage was to conserve manpower and hold it, if all possible, until our buildup was completed. Naturally, none of us understood the strategy, and none of us could convince the tremendous part that we were playing in the earliest stages of this great battle. Later that afternoon, firing could be heard to the southwest, and a lieutenant from the tanker outfit went to the road to see what was happening. He promptly returned and ordered us back to the woods. It's too dangerous to move out and the road in daylight. He told us to stay in the woods, out of sight, until dark. Lape was carrying a tripod, and I had the receiver, which was leaking antifreeze on my hand. We sat the gun on its tripod, tried to stop it from leaking at the petcock. The rest of the squad drew closer, and Fink cautioned them to spread out and form a screening perimeter for our own security. The lieutenant returned and informed Fink that his tanks were going to backtrack along the trail in the woods and see if he could enclose on firing up ahead from a different direction. He also told Fink again to stay put until dark and then send out a scout to reconsider the area ahead. The woods are crawling with Germans, snipers, and patrols, he cautioned as he left to join the tank command. Fink and I decided that our present position was not safe, especially after the tanks pulled out. We would do what the tankers had done, backtrack while still staying in the woods for concealment. It afforded an attempt to hook up with another outfit. Fink out to scout ahead, and we would follow as quietly as possible. It was almost dark now, and there were long shadows forming all about in the deep woods. The trees were laden down with heavy snow, and it was a beautiful sight to witness under more favorable circumstances. Just then, a single shot rang out and hit the snow-covered ground and began to build up, firing the line in a semicircle. Then there was silence, and I immediately thought of Fink. He was in the vicinity of where a shot was fired. I told the squad to stay put and keep their eyes on the snipers. I began to crawl forward, trying to stay out of the beaten path and the tanks had made, and save time to avoid heavy drips of snow. All the while, I was looking into the trees to see if I could spot a sniper. As I moved ahead, crawling slowly and looking around me as best I could, I had an eerie feeling that something happened to Fink, for he would have contacted me by now, either by returning or signaling in some way that he was all right. I crawled about 100 yards and I spotted Fink, laying very still in the pathway. There were some low-lying scrub bushes that would give me some cover. As I made my way toward him, he had not moved from the time I had first seen him. His face was down and his legs folded beneath him. When I reached him, I knew that he was dead. There was a single bullet hole in his right temple, just below his helmet, which he had a habit of tilting at an angle. He was killed instantly, and I was afraid I was going to get sick. I had never seen a person shot before. It upset me all the more, and that it was a close friend. A shot rang out, and a round kicked up in the snow to my left. I hurriedly grabbed Fink's M1 and his ammo, and skirted into a brush. Another shot hit the snow behind me, and I thought I had spotted a sniper in a tall evergreen 50 yards to my front. He was camouflaged all in white, but since he was perched in an evergreen, he was somewhat discernible. I picked up the broken twig and hurled to my left, watching the tree as I did. I saw the muzzle flash of the rifle, and I could see the sniper sitting in the crotch of the several branches. I opened up with Fink's rifle and emptied my entire clip. He reeled backwards and tumbled out of his hideaway, hitting the ground with a thud. I waited a few seconds since he did not move. I crawled over to his still body. He was dead. I had hit him with 4 rounds to the neck and head. For a split second, I was elated for avenging Fink's death. Weren't you worried about when that happened, if more German soldiers would have heard this?
They're encirculated, yeah.
And then what happened then? Did any German soldiers see this guy fall out of the tree?
The what?
Did any German soldiers see the sniper fall out of the tree that you shot?
Yeah.
And then what happened then?
Well, they get an idea what's up there then. Who's in the area?
Who came to pick up Fink's body?
Who?
Who came to pick up Fink's body?
I don't know. That was grave restorations. We wouldn't pick him up.
Did you get?
We throw the rifle, dig the rifle in the ground, and put the dog tags out and leave.
That was it?
Yeah.
A shot rang out, and kicked up to the left. Thinking there would be more snipers around, I quickly jerked one of Fink's dog tags around his neck.
They got the lights out, Dave. He's still wandering around.
Thinking there would be more snipers around, I quickly jerked one of Fink's dog tags around his neck and placed the steel helmet on a large branch, which I jammed in the snow beside him. Returning to the squad, I told them what happened again and cautioned them about snipers. This time, they took me more seriously. It was dark and I felt uneasy as we tried to find our way back out of this snow-covered maze. I had lost my sense of direction, and all the confusion I tried to calm down to collect my thoughts and think through what might be next move should be to get us back to our lines. I did not have much time to think about Fink's death, which in a way was a godsend. I felt terrible about it, and I suppose in normal times I would lament it, but there was not normal times. I had the reality of 10 men depending on me for their very lives. I kept thinking there were more snipers around, and worse yet, there was always a possibility of a possible danger of ambush. That would probably have been worse than snipers and ambush. I was confused and Lape's whining did not help matters. He was complaining about carrying the tripod too long, and I told Williams, one of the other ammo bearers, to carry it for a while. I still carried the receiver, and I finally relinquished it to another ammo bearer, freeing me to probe the area and to work out a plan of action. I tried to impress upon the squad not to make any noise and be quiet as possible. I decided to follow the road, but stay in the tree line to keep the road in sight. We had probably walked several miles from where we left Fink, and I was getting anxious and not seeing any friendly troops. So you could have been walking right into a German camp.
Yeah.
What finally happened?
Outpost.
You were walking several miles. What did you finally run into?
Huh?
You were walking several miles. You could have walked into a German camp, but what did you eventually walk into?
We'll try to get the hell out of there.
Okay. I was a little ahead of the column.
No, see, you got scouts out. Rifle companies had scouts out all the time. That was their job.
Okay.
And would they tell you where to go?
Huh?
Would the scouts tell you where to go?
Well, they tell you where the Germans weren't.
Okay.
You go bypass it because they'd have an outpost, they have machine guns set up and everything.
Okay.
As I followed a short bend in the road, I stopped short. Upon ahead of me in the evergreens and completely off the road were two Tiger tanks. Their engines shut down and several German tankers working on them. They were very quiet as they went about the task of making repair, the voices barely audible. So two German tanks broke down and the Germans are trying to fix them?
Yeah.
Immediately I thought of the German infantry protecting the tanks. As I lay on my stomach, watching them working on the tank, talking silently, I could see no support troops, but that did not mean much. They could be up in the trees or dug in. I turned and crawled away from them, hoping that I would not intercept the squad before they came upon them. Luckily, I reached them before they made the bend in the road, and I told them to stay down and listen for what I had to say. I told them briefly that there were Tiger tanks ahead, and I did not know if they had any support troops with them. I would said our best option was to skirt them widely, being as quiet as possible until we cleared them, and then get back on the course along the road. I would stay ahead of the scout, the immediate front, and Lape would back up and bring the rest of the squad on my signal. In essence, we would leapfrog ahead and with any luck bypass them completely. They understood, and I again cautioned them, no noise whatsoever, and that meant no talking. With Lape a short distance behind, I started out and made a wide...
And no smoke, and they would pick up the smoke.
Oh, the soldiers would smoke sometimes out there?
Yeah, they smell it, yeah.
That was a good point.
Huh?
That was a good point, because smoke would travel for hundreds of yards. The smell. With Lape a short distance behind me, I started out and made a wide circle around the Tigers. The rest of the squad followed up and always keeping Lape in view. We continued this fashion for a distance and reversed the circle and headed back toward the road. Everything seemed to be quiet ahead, but I was tense and expected a shot to ring out at any moment. I was hungry and cold, and my lips and throat were dry and parched. I had run out of water earlier this afternoon, and whenever I would crouch down just to listen, I would just take a handful of snow in attempts to wet my lips and throat. I saw the road once again through the trees and motioned Lape to get down and stay in position. He relayed the same message to the rest of the squad. I rested a moment, taking some snow in my mouth and letting it melt. The back of my shirt was soaked, and I was perspiring furiously. while I trudged through the knee-high snowdrifts. That must have been hard running through that snow.
Yeah,
It must have really slowed you down.
yeah.
I knew that I had to change before long or suffer freezing to death. The rest of the squad was in the same predicament, and we had to find some shelter quickly. I motioned the Lape that we're moving on. As I stood up, I could feel the water in my boots. The galoshes were like giant scoops, shoveling snow on the top of my shoes and finally melting as they hit the temperature of my body. I turned to look at the rest of the squad to see how they were doing. As I was not very encouraging, they appeared somber and fagged out. I had to get them into some kind of shelter or risk losing some of them. We followed the road for a while, and we came to a rise in the road, and I motioned the Lape to hold up the squad until I look around. As I came over the rise, I spotted a farmhouse down in the valley besides the shoulder of the road. I did not see any smoke coming from the chimney, nor were there any signs of people moving about. I motioned the Lape to join me, and I told him to keep the squad here until I gave them a signal to come. I would be the reconnector to the farmhouse and hope we might get lucky and utilize it for shelter for the night. I used the stone fence for cover to reach the back of the house. I still did not see any signs of life or even any farm animals moving about. I peered through the broken window and it seemed deserted inside. It was then I spotted a large gaping hole through the side of the building. It looked like a large shell had penetrated it upon further observation. I could see the inside of the house completely shattered in another large hole on the opposite end of the house. I then turned my attention to the barn as it looked intact. I reached the wide double door and pushed it gently open. It squeaked loudly, thinking that someone would hear me and send a chill up my sweating back. I entered a large barn and I could see it has been used once for storage of farm vehicles and equipment. Over the side was a large area piled high with hay. I was overjoyed at the sight of it upon further looking about. I was satisfied that there was no one else inside of it. I went back outside to where I had left Lape, and I told him to bring the rest of the squad up. They followed me into the barn, and when they saw the mounds of hay, they just collapsed into them. It was then I was cautioned them to be as quiet as possible, no fires, and to change their socks and fill their boots with straw to help drying them out. And if they had any dry clothes to change from the wet ones. I stated I would take the first watch, Lape would relieve me in an hour, and we would go down the squad in a fashion until daylight. I left them with a final word to get some sleep as we're pushing off early in the morning. I took a bunch of straw and set it close to the door. I didn't want to stay outside as it was a bit colder, and I figured I could hear anything approaching before I saw them. I took my boots off and their wet socks. I felt good to the shed that the wet clothes and put on dry ones. I also changed my long sleeve undershirt and finally stretched out a warm straw, hoping that I would not fall asleep. I opened a K-ration breakfast and started to gulp down its contents. As I lay there, I thought how strange it was lying in an unknown barn, miles away from anywhere. Then I thought, a fink lying out in the woods covered with snow. No one knew he was outside of reading his remaining dog tag. He would just be another dead GI. I felt bad about this death, and somehow I wish I could have done more for him when we were together. This was the first experience in losing a dear
I
friend.
gotta go pee.
Okay, press the button.